You guys asked, I delivered. As I always do. I always deliver whenever you guys repeatedly ask me of anything. You guys asked many times to get Phil back on the podcast. Everybody wants Phil on the podcast. When's Phil coming back on? Well, here he is. I got him back on. And he'll keep coming back on if I ask him enough to do it. But he's only going to do it if he feels like it's worth it. If people are watching, if people are listening, if people are liking this video, maybe if they're subscribing to my channel, maybe if they're leaving some feedback in the comments, maybe they're saying nice things about Phil, maybe they're saying nice things about me, maybe they're saying nice things about Gizmo and the Miyawaki tribe, because why wouldn't they? It only makes sense. But if we are not abiding by the laws of liking, subscribing, and commenting for the algorithm, then I don't know if we're going to see much more of Phil. And maybe that's okay with you guys. Maybe it is. And if that's the case, it's okay with me too. But before we get started, I just wanted to clear the air there, put it out there, because we can get more of Phil. We can get a lot more people on here, but there's gonna need to be more traction, guys. We need more engagement. I need you guys to help me out. I also need you guys to use code SEB. I need the code usage. I'm going broke. Code SEB. You get 10% off all your orders. We dropped some new flavors. Strawberry shortcake. It's great. I love it. I think you guys will love it too. You should definitely check it out. HG Muscle. The reason why I'm with them is because they're a great company. There's no other reason why I'd be with them. So yeah, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, and let's get started. Stalling during a cut, whether that's regarding somebody in a prep or just a general cut for the average general population, somebody who is overweight, dealing with thyroid downregulation, is that necessarily an issue for people that are overweight, or is that more so a concern only in preps? Does that apply to all the general public?
That's always going to happen. You're always going to have some form of diet fatigue when you're trying to recomposition your body, because when you're just acting freely, your body is going to go where it prefers to go, right? Where it wants to be. Now, granted, there's some foods and things that are addictive, like sugars and things like that, that are going to make you want to eat more than is typical and could, really make you accumulate higher body fat. But your body is really trying to reach a certain point in homeostasis where it wants to be. And some people's body fat just wants to sit higher than others, so your body's always trying to get there. So depending on how fast you've lost it, you're going to have diet fatigue. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is they crash diet because they want to lose weight fast. Usually they wait till the last minute, and then they're trying to drop all this weight fast. And yeah, great. Okay. You lost 15, 20 pounds in 2-3 weeks or whatever it is. But now your hunger's through the roof, your cortisol's through the roof. You can't even deal with the hunger. You can't deal with the fatigue, and it's gonna get you. People think that that you could just be super tough and you'll never crack, and that it's just not realistic. Everybody cracks. Now, I'm not gonna say everybody because there's always an exception to the rule. I know if you told Nick Walker not to cheat for the next 5 years, he wouldn't. And that's just because he's that driven, but there's also the reward, he's making the income. He's doing this for a living. He's fighting for, to be world champion. So, there's more on the line. So he's willing to sacrifice that. Whereas somebody sitting around their house, what does it matter if they have a cheat meal right now? They'll take care of it later. They're not trying to squeeze water out of a rock here, so it's not as big of a deal. So I wouldn't go crash dieting because you're going to have too much of a rebound effect on that. And you're just going to end up going back the other way. I like to have a more gradual approach. Now, if you are short time and you do want to crash diet, then I do suggest you come somewhat off the diet for a couple of weeks. Now, it doesn't mean start cheating and eating crap. It just means raise your calories until that fatigue and hunger goes away, and then get back into the diet. But this time, you've already got that spike in fat loss. You've already lost your 15, 20 pounds. And then you've pushed calories up, and you probably maintained that weight a little bit, maybe lost another pound of body fat. But then start easing it down slow again, because another thing people don't realize is you're not going to get another spike of 15, 20 pounds lost. That's not going to happen. You're only going to get that the first time. And then they start looking for that again. And, they get disappointed. It's not going to happen. So in a lifestyle situation, people just generally trying to live, I don't even suggest crash diets. I think that you should, diet reasonably. If you have some diet fatigue, like we do refeeds and preps for people, and that kind of helps, cope with that and compensate with that. But there's no real way to cope with, being starving and being that low of body fat. Nothing's going to make your hunger and weakness go away. It doesn't matter how much you eat. As soon as that food's digested, you're back to where you were. That's another misconception. People think that, after this refeed, I'm going to feel great. No, next day you're actually going to be hungrier because your metabolism is going a million miles an hour now, and you don't have the food. So actually, you're going to be more depleted. And yeah, your muscles might be fuller. You might get some great workouts, but your energy's still going to be bad. Your mood's still going to be bad. And you're still going to be starving, So, in contest prep, we do refeeds. I have had situations in prep where I have just bumped somebody's calories for a week or two because we were far ahead and diet was getting to them and we were able to do it, But in other circumstances, you have to find ways to mitigate that. But lifestyle, I just think, diet smoothly, go to maintenance, diet again. But you also have to teach those people how to live and manage that, everyday life. They're not going to be able to sustain a contest style diet forever. So you got to teach them how to eat forever.
Holy shit. Okay. You just opened like so many different rabbit holes. So we're gonna backtrack here, and I want to go back to the first thing that you said was sugar is addictive. Because I think a lot of people are gonna take that and try to misinterpret it, push it the wrong way. So explain exactly what you mean by that. Obviously, I can gather you're not saying if you eat sugar, you're just going to get fat. That's what people are going to take from that, though. So let's expand.
No. In moderation, almost anything is not too bad, And listen, sugar does have its benefits. Natural sugars have their benefits, right? Like, for example, they say that there's a saying that there's always room for dessert. And I know you know this because we've discussed this. The reason why they say there's always room for dessert is because sugar expands your stomach. So you might be full from your dinner, but you eat something sugary and it's going to create more room, So you're less likely to overeat it because you've already eaten a meal, but you can enjoy it, and it's going to help with how you feel as far as being stuffed from what you've eaten before, So I just ate my post-workout meal. I had steak and rice and I had some pineapple in there to make it sit just a little bit better. Bromelain helps the steak digest. It's a funny thing to say, but when you're digesting pineapple, it's also digesting you. You just do it better and faster because it breaks down proteins.
Yeah.
So I just think that shit, I actually lost my fucking thought. Not making
you talk very fast. Sugar.
The problem is my mind goes 10 times faster than I can speak. So I'm already thinking of the third sentence when I'm spitting out the first one.
I know this.
And I just got done with the gym, so my adrenaline's still pumping.
Yeah, you're lifting more than me now.
Who, me? Nah, yeah. I'm not trying to. It's a mistake. It's just like the weight just wants to come back. I'm actually like skipping meals and then lowering my calorie content so the muscle doesn't come back. I actually stopped training legs because first workout I did 2 plates per side on the leg press. I was struggling. The very next week I was doing 5, 6, no problem. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I don't want big legs again. They're annoying.
Yeah.
So just trying to slow it down.
I want to expand on this though, because I have a theory, and behind sugar being addictive, I think it's not just the whole aspect of it expands your stomach. I think there is some type of like neurological conditioning that happens with sugar. Absolutely. Because if you look at people, and I've noticed this myself, if you grew up in a household where you had a lot of candy, you had a lot of junk food, those people have a much harder time sticking to diets. They have those cravings. And if you ever talk to the people that were raised in those households where they only ate whole foods, they would never have sugar, like they don't really ever have those cravings. They're not ever like, oh, I want a donuts on prep. Like they're fine for the most part compared to other people. So there has to be some psychological aspect to that, because you don't.
There absolutely is.
Yeah,
we're constantly programming our bodies based on our behavior, but there's actually a physiological explanation for sugar being addictive. So what is addiction? Addiction is super physiological levels of certain individual or combinations of neurotransmitters, right? So super high serotonin, super high dopamine, things like that. Carbohydrates are a precursor to serotonin. Sugar or carbohydrates that digest very, very fast. So you get a very big spike of serotonin from eating a lot of sugar, especially if you're very, very hungry. And that's why they call it comfort eating. Because when people are depressed, what do they put them on? An SSRI, right? Serotonin reuptake inhibitor, so their serotonin levels go up. Well, when you eat a bunch of sugar and a bunch of junk food, your serotonin levels go up. So that's why people typically will go to junk food when they're depressed or angry or moody. They don't even realize it. It's a natural reaction because it raises your serotonin. It makes you feel better. And then they do it a little too often, and that's how depressed people start to get overweight, and it makes them feel worse, and it's a vicious cycle. So yes, it will actually spike serotonin. And post-show, when you're really depleted, I'm sure any of the competitors watching this right now, you're going to know this yourself. When you get that first bite of, you know, sugar and carbs post-show, and like you're really eating, you almost get like high from it. Like you're like really happy and talkative and friendly, and like all of a sudden you're in this like great mood, like you had a couple shots of vodka or something. You know, it's because you're getting a high off of it because your body's so sensitive to it. So yes, you can get a high off of it, but to your point, you know, programming ourselves and you know, habits are absolutely going to play a part, 1,000%. You know, whether you're used to producing energy at a fast rate or a slow rate, but metabolic rate is also going to play a part, because people with faster metabolisms will get more frequent low blood sugar. So your body wants that up quicker. So sugar will do that.
Now, do you think that at what point in your life you experience that? Like, is it reversible? Because like I said, the kids who grew up in households where they had really just junk food all around, that seems to be something they just latch onto for life. I don't know if you can develop that same connection if somebody just starts eating a bunch of candy when they're 20s. Like, is there this brain development that happens at that point in time where you pretty much carry that with you for the duration?
We can always rewire our brains with some effort. Now, the older you get, the harder it is, because as you age, neuroplasticity goes down. So that's where the saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks comes from. The older the person is, the harder it is to learn things, and the harder it is to rewire how your brain works. But you absolutely can. And I mean, I actually did. But it was more so because I got sick of it, and I had an unhealthy relationship with food. When I was younger, my metabolism was extremely, extremely fast. I've had abs since I was conscious. I can never remember not having abs in the mirror my whole life. So my metabolism is always extremely fast. So that would show you that, you know, so there's going to be times if my mom didn't feed me enough food or give me enough of what I wanted, that my sugar is going to be low, and I'd be starving, and I'd be thinking about it. And I used to hate when she would give me like one fruit roll up or one pack of Shark Bites, like these little gummies. Like, it would drive me nuts because I was hungry and I wanted more. And I still remember the very first time I got my own car and my license, I drove right to the store and I bought a factory box of fruit by the foot and ate the whole thing. And like, not because I was hungry, it was a psychological thing. You know, I was just enjoying being able to eat as much as I possibly wanted and do whatever I wanted and not have any repercussions. And, you know, it was just, that's what it was. But now that I have all of my digestive issues, I get a negative reaction whenever I eat a whole bunch of sugar and junk food. So now it makes me not want to do it, you know? So it's kind of like touching a hot pot now, you know, I'm getting consequences for it, whereas I never used to. So that made me back off and now not want to do it as much. So like, I used to eat McDonald's, 3-4 times a week, things like that. Domino's pizza every night, things like that. Now I probably eat junk twice a week, you know, maybe like a snack here and there, but like nowhere near what I used to do. I mostly eat now steak, rice, eggs, things like that. Fruit.
You eat a lot of junk food, I thought.
I eat what?
A lot of junk food.
No, I used to. Since I've moved down here and, you know, I'm doing different things with my life and, you know, really paying attention to, you know, my body and how I feel. And you just get sick of feeling like crap, you know? It just sucks when you like eat something you really like and then, you know, your stomach hurts and you're stuck in the bathroom and it doesn't feel good. And, you know, even today I had an issue because I decided it would be a good idea in the middle of the night to eat a whole bunch of dried fruit, which is all sugar. Mm-hmm. So it messed my stomach up. I knew I had to be ready on time for this. I knew I had to get to the gym. So I actually went to the gym with a stomach ache, had a pretty good workout, but like didn't get to structure my nutrition the way I wanted to. It's even bothering me a little bit right now, you know, so living with that is not something that's fun. So that's, you know, the side effects now are a deterrent for me.
That's good. You just lift it again, eating right. You might start competing again.
Like, no, never going to happen. Everybody is saying that to me. Everyone is saying that to me. It's not going to happen. But as far as people watching this that have issues with that, all you've got to do is change the way you think about things. Like, for example, when you're starving on a diet and you're hungry and you're sitting there telling yourself, I'm hungry, I'm weak, I'm flat. You're telling yourself all these negative things. So, of course, you're going to have a negative response. Instead, why not think, okay, I'm hungry right now. That means my body's looking for energy. And if I'm not eating energy, where's it coming from? Well, my anaerobic threshold is probably pretty low right now because I'm walking around. I'm not doing extraneous exercise, probably burning up body fat. So instead of having to do all that cardio, I'm getting some free body fat being burned right now, sitting on the couch or doing the chores around the house, or I'm at work and I'm burning some free body fat. And there's a lot of times when, like a client of mine, or I'll instruct one of my apprentices or a friend, that if their client is very, very active during the day and like they seem to be like overworked, or there's a lot of cardio, they're not getting sleep, you can actually reduce their cardio if they're getting their steps up really high. If you have somebody that's like 12,000 plus steps a day, I wouldn't put them on much cardio, because your NEAT is going to count for more NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, for people who don't know that term. Your NEAT is going to count for more than the calories you're going to burn on the treadmill. So if you're getting 12 plus thousand steps a day, you probably don't need much cardio to get into pretty good contest shape, or at least close.
But you're talking about a competitor, not somebody who's obese.
Listen, even somebody who's obese. Remember, if somebody's obese, they're going to be more susceptible to losing body fat at a quicker rate. Body's going to let go of it a lot easier. So just getting their steps up and cutting out one slice of pizza a day, they're going to lose weight.
No, I'm just saying, I don't want to tell them obese people to think I don't have to do cardio. I should just do NEAT.
Well, listen, if somebody's obese and they're listening to this and you do 15, 20,000 steps a day, you're probably going to lose weight unless you're eating like an absolute maniac.
100%.
So it's just something as simple as that. It's like, listen, do your fasted cardio in the morning and go for a walk around your neighborhood at night. And it's pretty goddamn easy. You have to work during the day. I'm sure you have physical activity. You're moving around. Even if you're sitting at a desk, your brain is burning glucose all day. So you're burning calories. As long as you're active, you're not just sitting around on the couch vegging out, then, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Back to the stalling out thyroid downregulation, because this is another thing I get asked a lot. I'm obviously not a fan of it, of doing aggressive cuts, but it's become very popular. I know you briefly touched on it, but what are the primary reasons? Because what I would typically say is there is going to be some thyroid downregulation that can potentially occur. And then also I think the main factor is just the sustainability of that type of diet going into such a big deficit for so long. But then people will also argue, well, you could do a refeed for a week and reset and you'll be back to normal, which I don't think is true.
You're never going to get your metabolic rate. People think that a lot of things in this field are like on and off switches, and there's scales to it. There's levels to it. It's not either just on or off, or right or left, or good or bad. So people have to stop thinking of things in terms of like absolutes, first off, because that's a big mistake that people make. Now, as far as extreme diets, if we're talking lifestyle, I don't think you should be extreme diet, because you don't have a deadline. Be responsible. You want to be in shape for summer, start early, start in February, and it gives you plenty of time to do something sustainable that you can sustain all summer and not worry about it. Now, if you're in a contest prep, you're not going to avoid thyroid downregulation. That's not going to happen. You can't avoid that.
But even in contest prep, nobody's doing extreme diets from the start, because then you just have increased muscle loss possibility, and you would experience that downregulation at a much faster rate. Everybody gradually preps into those extreme diets. People are just dropping their calories straight to 1,500.
That's also a situational thing, because there's times when I will crash diet somebody for the first 2 weeks, because I know that I'm going to get that giant loss of fat from them, and then I will actually bump their calories. So I'll bring somebody into the first 2 weeks really, really low, because if they're carrying, a decent amount of body fat, or they're very good muscularly and they train very hard, and I know they don't miss their meals, you're probably not going to lose muscle with a hard 2 week diet, but you are going to get a very, very large spike in fat loss. And then I can push your calories up and then keep the metabolic rate going, because 2 weeks is not going to really stall your metabolism out, especially if you did it right and you did a pre-prep, like, I always talked about, where you slowly get that metabolic rate going, so that by the time contest prep starts, your metabolic rate is going 100 miles an hour. So it's not going to slow down to 50 with 2 weeks of hard dieting. So you can push those calories back up, get that head start, and then you're at 14 weeks out, way ahead.
Yeah, you're talking about a specific scenario, right? Let's paint the picture here, because a lot of these people are asking, they're not even enhanced athletes, right? Obviously, that changes the game, right? A natural athlete, they want to cut down for summer. They're at 20% body fat, and they're going to go right from 3,500 straight to 1,400 calories and try to do that for 18 weeks, or 12 weeks, whatever. What is the issue with that?
Well, a natural athlete is going to be even easier in that situation, believe it or not, because remember, they're not walking around with super physiological amounts of muscle. So because they're not so far from homeostasis, they're not going to be so susceptible to losing it. The more muscle mass you're carrying, the more susceptible you are to losing it. So your body wants to be at, say your body wants to be 180. If you're at 190, your body, and you can sustain a pretty goddamn hard diet and you're not going to lose any muscle. Now, if you're 250, you probably lose some muscle on a really hard diet. And this is why if you look at natural bodybuilders, they do a lot more HIIT cardio than enhanced bodybuilders do. Because the HIIT cardio is just not good. It's not going to burn up their muscle the same way because they're not as susceptible to muscle loss because they don't have so much that the body wants to get rid of it. So it's going to be a different scenario. I think natural people actually can, crash diet a little bit easier and not worry about muscle loss. When you start getting muscle loss in an enhanced individual, well, your metabolic rate's slowing down. You have cortisol elevation. Now you have all these other factors and issues that you're causing. That's not going to be as much the case with a natural. As long as you're managing recovery and making sure you're not overtraining and making sure you're not overdoing it and making sure you're not overdoing the cardio. Now we're talking about crash dieting. We're not talking about extreme amounts of cardio.
But that's also insinuating that they don't have a lot of mass. Let's say that somebody has a decent amount of tissue, like somebody who's trained for 5 to 10 years.
No,
they have a decent
amount, but they're not going to have the amount that an enhanced individual does.
No, of course. So they're not as susceptible because they're closer to homeostasis. But still, if they go into that extreme deficit for 8 to 12 weeks, are they not at a higher chance for?
Yeah, no, for sure they can lose something. But odds are if they built a large amount of muscle naturally, they probably are very, very good at lifting. They're very, very, very good at managing their diet and recovery. They probably lift very, very hard. So they're more equipped to sustain that muscle mass too. Because a lot of times people jump in and they get enhanced before they learn how to grow muscle naturally, or because they struggled naturally and they wanted to get big and they were impatient and they never learned that part, So I would argue that there's a lot of natural bodybuilders who train a lot harder than enhanced bodybuilders because of necessity. They had to, so they're more equipped to sustain that muscle mass than somebody who's enhanced that doesn't lift very hard.
Okay, so are you saying that for these people that an aggressive cut would be advisable? Is the regulation aspect not a factor?
I don't ever like aggressive cuts because any extreme is going to have an extreme reaction, right? So we always cite like Newton's third law. Any action is going to have an equal opposite reaction. If you push, it's going to push back, just as much. So if you ease into it, you're not going to have as much pushback. And you want something that's sustainable. You don't want to lose weight for a little bit and then have it all gained back. So I think that anytime that you can take a slower approach is the smarter and healthier thing to do.
Okay. Now, say they experience that stalling period, how do they go about, they can't use T3, increasing upregulating thyroid hormone? Because a few day refeed isn't going to really have a substantial effect on that. They need to take a whole break.
It's not going to have a substantial effect, but it will have some effect. Now, that I don't like T3. And one of the reasons I don't like T3 is because it really doesn't discriminate calories. I've almost never seen a scenario where somebody started taking T3 and didn't get a little bit weaker like right away. When we see that across the board typically. So there's going to be exceptions to the rule, mega dosers or people with great genetics for muscle growth or people that lift insanely hard. But usually you use T3, you're going to start to lose a little bit of muscle mass slowly. So I try to do without it as much as I can. I won't use T3 until I can't get that metabolic rate to bump anymore with a refeed. So as long as I can make that refeed work, I'm going to stay away from T3. And I try to keep it out. I try to get inside 8 weeks without using T3, usually. That's like a rule of mine that I like to try to abide by. If I can get inside 8 weeks, I'm pretty safe. And then I don't have to get into high doses of T3. So as far as getting a bump in your metabolic rate, again, a person that's doing this for lifestyle, you can just do 2 weeks of a little bit higher calories and let that thing slowly climb and, manage your response. If you start to gain too much weight, you can back it down a little bit. If you're still losing weight, you can keep increasing it and keep generating more metabolic increase, right? And you could manage it that way. Now, I think everybody should have a coach that knows how to do this and not doing it for themselves because they don't know what to look for and they don't understand what the situation is, So this is the only sport I've ever seen in the world where people think they don't need a coach. You wouldn't play football without a coach. You wouldn't play basketball without a coach. You wouldn't swim without a coach. But they think they can do something as complex as this without a coach, with no understanding of physiology. I think they watch a few YouTube videos and know what they're doing. You should probably hire a coach and at least learn something, and then maybe try to do it on your own. But you're not going to just come out of left field and figure all this out. It's not going to happen. So guidance is going to be key on that. Now, if you're in contest prep, we've seen that 1 day refeeds pretty much do nothing. So refeeds always typically have to be multiple days. I always do 2 to 3. I've done up to 4 now based on the individual's response. So it depends. If they keep looking better, I'm going to keep doing it. If they all of a sudden are retaining a lot of water, that's a sign that, there's a lot of insulin surging, that there's a lot of aldosterone rising, possible potential blood pressure issues, all kinds of other side effects. So, and I don't want them to gain body fat back, and I don't want the prep to get too far away from me. So as long as I see them improving, I'm going to leave it alone. But if it's not, then I'm going to fix it. I think I've mentioned on here before, a client of mine, Mike Charles, that I used to work with years ago. He was just insanely hard worker, like one of the hardest workers you could ever find. And he didn't have lean genetics. He got fat real easy if he wanted to. He trained very hard and did his cardio. That's why he didn't, but he could. But I got him to the point where I was refeeding him on 1,000 grams of carbs every 3 days because he was just burning through it. And then we would do refeeds and it'd be 2, 3, 4 days. Like his body was burning through it. So as long as I see an improvement, I'm going to keep going. You can't follow generic rules. You got to operate off of what you see in front of you. And a lot of times people will make assumptions of what they think will happen. But yeah, you can have an expectation of what may happen, but you still got to watch what's going on because you could be wrong.
What are you talking about in terms of thyroid metabolic function? Or are you talking about in terms of just staying full and replenishing glycogen stores?
I'm talking about looking for a look. See, obviously we want to replenish glycogen stores. We want to stay full. We want to have our metabolic rate going. We want all those things going in our favor. But you also have to consider their look, their individual look. If I see that you're staying dry and I see that you're getting tighter and I have pushed your calories up, well, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to keep going as long as I see a positive result. Everybody expects that after 3 days, the client's going to be holding water and they look worse and, the body fat might be gaining back and all this stuff, but that may not be the case, So it's okay to assume that may happen. And typically that is what's going to happen. But that's not always what's going to happen. If you get to day 3 and they look great, why not go to day 4? If they go to day 4 and get even better, why not go to day 5? Keep going until you see it stop. If you're getting a positive response, keep going. There's a saying I always say to everybody, don't fix what's not broken. If it's working, don't change what you're doing. Be honest with yourself and what you're observing. A lot of times people coaches won't have the confidence to say this person's still getting better. I'm going to keep this going. But what do we see? We see this a lot. I believe we saw this with Carlos Thomas. He switched coaches before nationals. I think it was like 3 weeks out, 1 year, 4 weeks out. And what did the coach do? He drastically increased his food. Now, why do coaches usually have the balls to do that when they switch? Because that coach knows that they're not responsible for what was going on previous to that. So if this works, great. If not, it's not my fault. So it's tougher to make that call when you're the coach and you know that all the responsibility lies on you up to this point. But if you get a client from somebody else and it's 4 weeks out, it's like, hey, I can try whatever and I'm not responsible for this. So they're usually a little bit more ballsy and they can let the calories keep riding. And what ended up working for Carlos was they pushed his calories up and they just left it up. And he got better and better and better and better and better. And they won. So yes, he has phenomenal genetics, but he does not have phenomenal genetics for getting a contest cheer. That's very hard for him. So to get that job done was difficult. It required troubleshooting and it worked out well. But again, that's just a matter of making the right call, looking at what's in front of you and making a judgment call based on that, not based on assumptions, not based on what people told you would happen, not based on what people tell you is going on. If you know what you're looking at and you know what you see, go with your instincts. Don't let any preconceived notions deter you from making the right decision. So if I see somebody continually getting better, I'm going to keep them doing better. If we get to day 3 and they're holding water like as expected, okay, then we stop there. We got the job done. 3 days of a refeed, your glycogen stores got replenished. You got a metabolic bump, and you're probably going to have 3-4 days of phenomenal workouts now. So, we did something. We got something out of it. Now, if you get to the point where your refeeds are just doing nothing for you, that's the point where you need T3.
What if you're natural?
Well, if you're natural, then you shouldn't be dieting to that extent in the first place. Like a lot of the best natural bodybuilders don't diet 16 weeks. They do 20, they do 26, even leaner guys. Yeah. I remember watching Skip LaCour prep for Team Universe. And he posted pictures every week and I was following it as a kid. And dude, he looked at 16 weeks out the way some people look at 4 weeks out this today. He just did it so slow, so carefully, so calculated. And the pictures, the changes were so subtle. Like every week I'm sitting here looking, and I'm a young kid, so I didn't know any better. I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, this guy's ready. And then next week he gets tighter. And I'm like, okay, this guy is ready. Next week he gets tighter. Oh, wow, like maybe he's going to slow this down. He's ready. Next week he gets tighter. And he knew what he was doing, but he came down very, very slow. So naturals need to come down a lot slower. As far as, coming into a contest prep for a show, and, it's going to, result in a better response because you don't have all of those enhanced drugs to help you, recover when your body's really beat down, so you can get ahead with a crash diet better and not be as susceptible to muscle loss, but you're also going to get beat up more at the end trying to get peeled.
So you would say is the main factor managing that fatigue?
Yeah. Fatigue management is a huge part of contest prep, and people don't realize that. One of the main reasons people can't sleep is because their cortisol's through the roof. Mm-hmm. People think that it's, I took my stimulants too close to bed. Well, yeah, that may have an effect on cortisol, but it's not the only effect. Because my blood sugar is low. Yeah, that may have an effect too, and that could affect cortisol as well. But generally, your cortisol just generally was climbing because you're in contest prep. You're beat up. You're not recovered. You're starving. You're moody. And you're generally in a beat up state. So mitigating and really making sure you manage cortisol is going to be a major factor.
Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about the difference. Why would you, even though I don't think you do it, incorporate cheat meals versus a refeed in a prep setting or just a general cut setting?
If I'm being honest, and anybody who's worked with me, don't take offense, but I don't give cheat meals unless I think the person psychologically needs it. So I will never opt for a cheat meal in prep unless I think the person's just ready to crack. If I think they're ready to crack, I'm going to give them a cheat meal because of the psychological benefit that we're going to have, something to look forward to. But not only that, I'm not going to give them a cheat meal off the cuff. I'm going to use it to drive them. So I'm going to say it's Monday. I'm going to say, okay, you're going to have a cheat meal Friday. So now in their head, they're like, I just got to work hard for 4 more days and I get a reward. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a carrot hanging in front of them that they're sprinting for. Rather than, okay, I'm every day waking up hopeful, maybe I'll get a cheat meal, but you don't know. There's been no talk of it. So you just wake up every day, like maybe I'll get it today, and you're just hanging in limbo. But if I give you a day and a time, you're going to work harder. One of my, or the only coach that I've ever really had, Ken Skip Hill, has a method of letting people diet very, very hard during the week. And then he gives them an entire cheat day all through prep. So what they know, people can usually adhere to that, and it works really well for normal people who don't have the best genetics. They usually have a hard time. Why? Because there's a carrot in front of them. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a reward. It's I just got to suck it up until Sunday, and then you work. Then you enjoy Sunday. You feel like crap, and you're like, I'm ready to get back on my diet. And then you just got to work hard again until Sunday. And he'll manage that whatever way he deems fit. But it gives you a prize at the end. It gives you something to work for. So if I'm going to give somebody a cheat meal, unless somebody's really, really flat beat up and they got to the point where they start looking softer and they look like they've lost muscle, if they get softer all of a sudden and their weight is still down, that means they're about to lose some muscle mass. So at that point, maybe I'll give a cheat meal because I need a calorie spike quick. But typically, if I'm going to give them a cheat meal and it's psychological, I'm going to put it 3-4 days from now so that they have something to think about, have something to work for, to work in my favor.
Okay. Now, say somebody does that and because you see coaches do these weekly burger and fries, they'll do that throughout prep. If you do this aggressive approach and you do 1,500 calories all throughout a prep, but then every Saturday you have this big meal, is that one big meal going to have any actual impact in keep maintaining thyroid function?
No, it's going to have that psychological benefit that's going to get you through those 1,500 calorie days.
Mm-hmm. So you're still going to have that down regulation at the same rate opposed to.
Well, I don't think that he gives cheat days. He doesn't give cheat meals. So I don't think that he's going to I don't think that he's going to expect that one meal is going to bump your metabolic rate when you're dieting hard throughout the week. However, an excessive calorie push will. So you can't usually do this with clean food. You're not going to get 6,000-7,000 calories out of clean food, But if you're extreme dieting, then you can get an extreme spike in food and make a difference. So when Skip does this, he's got entire days. And I was even telling my buddy, that I'm helping out now, that last time he had a cheat day, it didn't really benefit him because he didn't eat in excess of calories. So it didn't give them the metabolic spike. It just pulled him out of ketosis and made him feel sluggish. And, it really didn't do anything beneficial. And he really regretted it because he felt like he's making great progress and now it's slowed everything down. And, it wasn't really working. And I told him, listen, next time you have a cheat day, if you're going to have a cheat day, make it count or just don't do it. It's one or the other. So you've got to have some type of calorie push to get a metabolic response. You're not going to be able to do that with clean food in one day, but you can do it with junk food, which is why I prefer clean food spread out over 2-3 days, because you're going to have a more consistent response. You're not going to have any digestive issues like you will with the junk food. You're probably going to have an adverse response. But not only that, one reason I don't like to introduce junk food into diets is because when you don't have a food for a certain period of time, your body kind of forgets about it. You know, your microbiome, your flora content, and your digestive tract kind of repopulates, and your body kind of forgets it. And anybody who's competed in here is probably nodding their head right now that they were fine until they had that first burger. And now every day they want a burger. It's because now your body got a taste for it. So like me personally, when I would prep, I prepped better without cheating, because as soon as I gave myself a cheat meal, it's all was on my mind for the rest of prep. But if I never gave myself a cheat meal, well, that option was off the table. Might as well not think about it. And my body wasn't craving it because my body didn't know what to crave, you know?
Yeah. So back to what you said there, the refeed, you do it over, because you can't get that huge caloric surplus. You do it over the span of a few days. It's more calculated, obviously, but in that same sentence, you said that you could have this huge influx of calories from, a cheat meal or a cheat day. So that is still going to create a metabolic response. It's not just for restoring glycogen. Like you have a fucking Saturday, you have like 2-3 burgers and fries, whatever. That's going to create a metabolic response that's going to potentially help.
Any calorie spike is going to create some type of metabolic response. Now, anybody who's dieted and had a cheat meal and they were really dieting and really lean, think back. As soon as you started eating, what happened? You probably start sweating all over your table, didn't you? What is that? That's your metabolism speeding up. I've literally dripped on my food and it tasted salty, and I didn't care because I was so hungry. Like I was pouring sweat. So there is a response. It's just, is that response sustained? Probably not. It's probably going to drop pretty quickly, if it's just a meal. But if it's numerous meals, you're going to keep getting that push, and it's going to accumulate more. And it's going to, move more, because now your body is all of a sudden saying, I'm getting my calories now, it's no longer in starvation mode. So it's more likely to speed your metabolic rate up. But yes, everybody who's ever gotten a cheat meal and they're really, really lean and depleted and dieted and they start eating, every one of you started sweating.
Yeah. So obviously it depends on the individual and, their genetic metabolic rate as it is. I think a good example of this, I'll put a picture of him for anybody who doesn't know, is Gabe. What would you do with somebody like Gabe? Do you give him a bunch of cheat meals?
What I do with Gabe is not normal, and I don't want people to think that it's normal.
But I'm just using somebody as an extreme metabolism, like an extreme case like that.
Let's let everybody know about Gabe. First of all, Gabe doesn't gain body fat. Okay, Gabe's body does not produce GH, so he's got paper thin skin. The pictures don't do him justice. People who see Gabe in person, they see him online and okay, this guy's peeled like everybody else. But when you see him in person, he does not look like the other peeled people, because he's got dick skin everywhere. Like he looks like if you pull on his skin, it's gonna rip like a t-shirt. So his skin is so thin, like I watched him walk around the kitchen once, and everything is just flickering. Everything.
Yeah, it's insane.
Because you could literally like almost see through his skin. So his skin is paper thin, so that even helps. And he doesn't gain body fat. I don't think I could make his glutes disappear if I tried. So I feed him excessively. I've given him 10,000 calories the day of a show with insulin. Like it's very, very hard to fill him out. It's very, very hard for him to grow. I don't calculate calories. I calculate macros. But if I were to guess, he's probably, when we're bulking, in excess of 6,000-7,000 calories a day consistently. And he has glutes in all year long. So he's actually in medical school right now. He's graduating. He's going into his residency. He's going to be a medical doctor. He's very, very smart. So we have some great conversations. He understands like the state that he's in. And, that's one of the reasons why he likes to work with me, because I do understand the medical side of things and I can explain things. And I'm not just doing things, randomly out of like trial and error type things. And, we work generally pretty well together. But that's a very odd, unique scenario that almost nobody's ever going to run into. But I literally feed him as much as he can digest.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, because I would think it's like a normal person, right? The metabolic response they need could probably be achieved by just doing a refeed, bringing up to, slightly around maintenance, above what their maintenance calories would be for a couple of days, and they'll get a good response. But then if you take somebody, doesn't have to be exactly like Gabe, but just in that direction where they have that super fast metabolism, they're always lean. It's like that person, I would assume you'd probably opt for more of that cheat meal route because they just need like, 5,000-6,000 calories to really get a response.
Well, when I was competing, I could not get enough clean calories in the day to grow because my metabolism was too fast. I had to get over 5,000 calories a day in order to grow. Now, I'm not good at eating, especially not clean food. I'm only good at eating junk food, but I'm not.
You could do that. You could do that from clean food, though.
You could, but think about how much clean food that would take. It would take astronomical amounts, and plus, I hated clean food. I always had to start my diets by starving myself for the first 2 weeks, so that I would get so hungry that I would eat my diet because I couldn't stomach it otherwise. If you tried to give me grilled chicken on the first day of my diet, I'd probably throw it up. And actually, I've almost done that. So, like, my body was just rejecting it. My body didn't like it. It might have been
wired that way.
Well. Yeah. So, with Gabe, the concern was him losing weight too fast. That's the issue with him. If he misses a meal, he's going to lose 5 pounds, and it's a major issue. So, like with me, for example, I had a friend help me out the last 6 weeks in 2017 for North Americans, and the person eventually put me on 50 grams of carbs a day with my metabolic rate and my muscle mass. And I think I've sent you the video where I was like 8 weeks out at 260, and like I was pretty lean, and I ended up competing at 225. So muscle mass was falling off at a rapid rate. I think I stressed the living hell out of my body. My ankles started holding water. Like my body was beat to hell like you wouldn't believe. And I looked it. I looked sickly on stage. I was peeled. I was in great shape, but I looked very sickly and I looked very unhealthy. Now in 2018, which is the time that everybody remembers my death face, right? Everybody joked around. They called me Death Face Mr. Olympia because I look like I could have auditioned for Thriller without any makeup on. But my low days were 350 grams of carbs for that prep. So that's another thing. When somebody has a fast metabolism, you'll really stall their metabolism out if you try to diet them like other people. So you've also got to have the instincts and the confidence in yourself to keep somebody's calories high if that's what's working, Yeah. So, like even Ben Hodge, who just won Junior USA, I didn't diet him on low calories. I think the lowest his carbs got were 150, 200 a day, maybe.
Yeah, no.
And that's not very low. His protein was probably 350, 400. Fats were not super low. So the calories are very, very high. So you've got to always, handle each situation individually. And in my situation, it was more beneficial to keep my food higher. When I used to diet myself when I was younger, I would always over diet because I was scared to eat too much food. I didn't know to watch what was going on. I listened to what people told me, and I had these expectations and assumptions, and that's what I operated off of. And when I finally got the guts to feed myself, because I always prep myself, to feed myself the way that I would treat a client, then things started working. I still remember, even though we don't get along, George Farah messaged me on, I think it was Muscle Without or somewhere, and he said, bro, he's like, you bring your clients in so good, but you always mess yourself up. He's like, this is what you do. He said, you take your pictures, you put somebody else's face on there, and you prep them. He's like, just basically pretend it's not you.
Yeah.
And once I got the guts to do that is when things really turned around. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have a hard time believing that you're able to eat that much. Because I even posted a clip. I did the podcast with Callum Raystrick. I don't know if you know who Callum is. And my friend Niall Darwin, who just qualified for the Olympia, he's the same age as me. And he was on preps. The lowest food got was 3,800 calories. And everybody was fucking mind blown by that. But his glutes were shredded by the time he was like already in the off season. He was eating well over 6,000 calories. It's just, when you have so much muscle mass.
I know who both of them are. And I do know that he diets on very high calories. So you've got to see, like a lot of times people ask me questions and they think that I'm like holding something back or I'm trying to treat it like, oh, you've got to pay me if I'm going to answer this question for you. No, but the answer really is that it depends. It's always individual. Every prep is going to be individual. If you looked at 10 different preps of mine, unless you saw my template, my logo in the background and setup, you might think it was 10 different coaches. Because I'm going to do what their body dictates. I'm going to do what their body tells me to do. I don't stick to one style. I'll go high carbs. I'll go low carbs. I'll go high fat. I'll go low fat. I'll go keto. I'll go whatever. I'll do what their body tells me it needs to do. I watch, I pay attention, and I let their body dictate what needs to happen. I'm reading biofeedback. I'm reading the response, and then I'm going to make decisions based off of that. The problem is a lot of coaches, they're set in their ways, and they have this one set method that always works or a couple of methods that always work. And if you look at 10 different of their programs, you can tell it's the same person doing it. you know?
Mhm.
So aside from my PED programming, which is pretty similar always, because there's not much you can really change with that to make a drastic change in a prep, but rather than accept, doses going up and down and proper use of AIs and things like that. But as far as the nutrition, as far as the training, mine can be wildly different, depending on the person.
I mean, yeah, we did keto towards the end, but up until that point, my food was high all the way up until that point. Really, like, it was hard for me to even eat.
Well, we were in trouble because remember, we caught your gear was fake up until 8 weeks out.
I know. I'm just saying, I got lean while eating. It felt like I was still bulking for the majority of that prep.
But the thing is, if we would have approached that prep differently, had you not ended up with fake gear, because you would have retained more muscle mass, you would have been stronger, your metabolic rate would have been faster, so I would have probably fed you a lot more. Anybody who wants to, question whether or not your gear was fake, well, nobody is on a diet with their glutes nearly in and jumps from 110s to 135s on incline in 2 weeks. Yeah, that's a pretty good indicator that what you were taking was not very good. So that was a big problem that we had. You were nowhere near as big as you could have been. And that would have meant me feeding you a lot more. And then if your metabolism sped up, I would have fed you even more. We don't know how high you would have gone, but we'll find out this time.
Yeah. We'll see once I get actually fucking start training here. What about integrating cheat meals into an off season? Would you say it's also just primarily just for a psychological break from the diet, and you can really afford it?
Yep. See, the thing is, I think I need to make it be better at making this very clear. When I get new clients, I get a very common text from people. They're like, I ate this, and this. Was that enough? And my answer always is like, it's not an eating competition. And I'm like, this doesn't make any difference in your growth whatsoever. I tell them, I said, my best athletes choose to skip that cheat meal and just eat another clean meal. They just eat another 10-ounce steak, cup of rice, cup of greens. You can even skip the rice. You could have a clean meal of steak and rice. You can stick to no carbs, because my off days are generally no carbs until the cheat meal. But the cheat meal is 100% psychological in the off season, and the best athletes don't really do it. A lot of the Olympians, a lot of the open pros, a lot of the classic pros, they don't even want to have their cheat meal. Sometimes the coach has to force them because they want a calorie spike, because that person just sticks to their diet nonstop, or they're worried about their mental state. They're worried about their moods. If I see somebody getting really moody, I might force them to have a cheat meal just because I know it'll make a difference. Yeah. So it could be again, that's a psychological aspect. It's not a physical aspect, but the best competitors are going to forego their cheat. They're not going to want it because it's not going to be conducive in any way.
Yeah. Now, when you're pushing growth, when you're in that bulking phase, off-season phase, what are some indications to look for? As how do you know when to increase food? Okay, so what people look for off season, I feel like people have some of the indicators confused, because like if the scale's still moving, they're like, okay, things are good. What if their body fat's going up? What if their water retention is going up? People don't take that into consideration. And now we have a great tool that's available to us in the US that we didn't have in the past. We have over-the-counter A1C tests. So that'll tell us how sensitive their insulin sensitivity is now. So what happens is somebody will be gaining weight, but they're holding more and more water. What is that a sign of? That's a sign of insulin resistance, because now their insulin is pulsing higher for the same amount of food, and aldosterone directly correlated with insulin is going to go up, and that's what causes sodium reabsorption and makes you hold more water. So higher insulin, you're going to hold more water. So when you start to hold a bunch of water, that's a sign your insulin sensitivity is being affected. So you need to keep an eye on indicators like that. But one of the main indicators is just going to be performance. And the problem with chasing performance is people don't keep track of it the way they think they do. They don't keep a logbook. So like somebody will, I'm going to give just BS numbers. Somebody being incline dumbbell pressing 130s, and then they'll do 135s, and then they'll do 140s, right? But then they'll have a couple bad weeks, and they'll drop back to 125, 130. And then their next few check-ins are going to tell me, oh, my strength is going up, my strength is going up. But you still haven't got past the 140s. So you haven't grown past that point until you've gotten stronger than that. And contrary to what some people will have you believe, strength matters when you're trying to put muscle mass on. It absolutely does. And that's why when I get a new kid and I get young kids, one of the first things I do is I try to build their strength base. Mm-hmm. Because, listen, if I'm doing reps with 225 on bench, or I'm doing reps with 315 on bench, I'm going to get bigger with the 315. We want to get to the point where you can use heavier reps, heavier weight for volume and reps. That's what's going to grow the most muscle. But the quickest way to push your strength up is low reps.
So that's not necessarily going to result in the most muscle right away, but it's going to result in you being able to now use more weight with more volume and reps, and that's going to generate the most amount of muscle. So you have to get stronger if you want to grow. And getting stronger means getting past where you were, not just am I going up this week versus last week. It's just where you were topped out. You know, if you want to get bigger, you've got to get stronger, period. And then once you've built that muscle, you can maintain. Again, I'll refer to Nick Walker a lot because I know a lot of his story. But like we saw him, he was shoulder pressing, what he pressed, 210s, shoulder press, something crazy like that.
Yeah, 210,
200, 210, something like that. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
But he doesn't do it anymore because now he has the muscle mass. It's very easy to maintain and retain once you've built it. Building it the first time is hard. So like you said at the beginning of this podcast with me, like, oh, I can't stop this muscle mass from coming. That didn't happen when I started. I had to fight and claw for every millimeter I grew, every ounce that I put on. I was like clawing up a mountain of like mud, like just struggling all the way up. It comes back now because it's old muscle. It's not new muscle. My body remembers it now. My body has programmed it, and my body will get back to it. But the first time is hard. So you're going to need to push your weight up. So I actually got to ask Jay Cutler this question in MD. And because he always talked about, oh, I don't go over 405 squatting, I time under tension, this and that. So I posed the question. I said, but how strong were you when you were young? And could you have gotten this big without it? And his answer was, well, I used to rep 500 on bench and 700 on squat. And no, I wouldn't have got this big if I didn't do that first. But now I don't have to do that to maintain this. And I just refine it, which was a great answer and a great approach. It's a way to stay safe. So build your strength while you're young. And then once your mass is there, you can back off. And I think I've even told you this before. I said, listen, when we get to the point of your peak mass, we're not pushing strength anymore. And we're going to take more time off because we saw it with Kevin Levrone. We've seen it with other people. I even posted it in my story 2 days ago, but somebody asked me about this. You know, once you've gained a certain amount of muscle, you can come off and then regrow it really, really fast. People are afraid to cruise and PCT and come off cycle. Oh, I'm going to lose all that weight. Listen, you might lose 15 pounds coming off cycle. You're going to get that back in the first 2-3 weeks back on cycle. Mm-hmm. So, you know, old muscle comes back really, really fast. And it's a lot easier to maintain. But you have to push your strength up first. So I think one of the main indicators is going to be tracking strength and performance. Are you getting more reps? Are you getting more weight? I mean all-time personal record. I don't mean comparable to what you did last week. Yes, if we're continually increasing weight relative to last week, we are growing. But you're not going to exceed your best muscle mass and development without exceeding your best strength.
Okay. So if I'm getting this correctly, the indicators for whether or not you should push food up would be progression in the gym. Is progression happening? If it's not, and you're also at a reasonable body composition where you're not holding an excessive amount of fat or water retention, at that point, but if you are holding an excessive amount of body fat, then no. But if strength isn't going up, you're holding an excessive amount of body fat, you would not push food any higher. But what about if you are if you're still staying at the same weight, but your strength is still continuing to go up, would you still push food up at that point?
Well, if strength is still going up, I'm not going to touch anything because there's going to be periods where your strength is going up, but the scale is not. Yeah. And then bodybuilding is not linear. You know, you'll go 3 months without gaining much weight, and then all of a sudden you'll get 15 pounds. Yep. You know, that's how bodybuilding works. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to be linear. So that's what people expect. It's just going to be straight line. It doesn't work that way. So you're going to have periods where you're like battling and fighting, and you know maybe you need a cruise, maybe you need a reset, maybe you need a deload. You know, who knows what you need? But you know that's what an experienced coach is for. But managing that is going to be an important process. But as far as increasing the food, if your performance is increasing, I'm not going to increase your food because I don't need to. I'm not going to fix what's not broken. And now, granted, once your progression starts to slow down, now I know I can add food. And usually because you've had that strength progress already, when I add food, there's an immediate spike. And, you know, you guys will see that. Like you see the kids that I post on my page, like I have a few kids that probably added over 40 pounds in the last year. You know, some of them are first cycle, some of them are not, you know, but that's pretty much the process that I had with all of them. They had a spike in muscle growth because the first time working with somebody who really knew what they were doing and they really got on a proper program, but then they kind of leveled off and then we focused on strength. And then strength went up. And then I threw food in and then they had another spike and then we repeated the process. So that's how we really got moving. But again, I posted this in my story the other night because somebody posed the question. And it's a John Meadows quote. It's you are what you absorb. It's not you are what you eat. So there's many times people come to me and they're eating a certain diet And then when I send them the program, they freak out and they're like, you lowered my calories. That can't be right. It's absolutely right. You didn't have your food in the right places. This is why I do macros and not calories, because strategically placing food matters based on performance and recovery, and digestive efficiency is going to matter. So if the person's clogged up and like a traffic jam, everything is not being absorbed the right way. Everything is not processing the right way. And when your body is in a stressed state like that, you're not going to grow. So there's a lot of times when I'll restructure a diet, when somebody comes to me, actually lower the calories and weight starts going up.
Yeah. I don't even want to get, because we've already covered that so many times, the whole fucking nutrient partitioning thing. We've covered that way too many times. So I don't want to get into it, but it's something that did remind me of is I remember the first coach I had, the first guy I worked with was Guy Cisternino. I remember this specifically. And he wrote me the diet. And it was a clean diet, had no macros on it, no calories. And I did the math and I was like, this is a lot less than I've been eating, but it was all whole foods. And he was basically just like, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And at that time I didn't get it, but obviously like looking back on it, it's just funny to think that. Yeah, of course. It's fucking, I was eating steak and chicken 5 times a day, it was 6 times a day, whatever it was. It was just, I've never actually eaten like a bodybuilder to that extent. And obviously that's the most effective method. But, a lot of people just get stuck on the numbers. Oh, this is what all the time I say.
He probably looked at the diet you were following. And he said, this is completely inefficient.
Yeah, probably. But this is all the time these kids will, ask, I'll make a video on carb cycling. And they're like, well, I'm going to be in a deficit on those rest days when I have less carbs. It's like they look at everything as these numbers rather than is the food actually doing the job that you want it to do? Not just about being in this surplus every single day or hitting this exact number every day. It's not that black and white.
The big problem I see with this is coming from a lot of the culprit of this, and I'm not blaming them. It's not their fault. They don't know any better. Or a lot of the young influencers. Because these kids see these people growing at rapid rates and they're drinking weight gainer shakes and they're eating all these junk calories to grow and they're doing these crazy things, but they don't consider that person just has a lot better genetics than you. Uh-huh. And they might be using a lot higher doses than you. When somebody starts turning colors and they start turning purple and whatnot, it's a pretty good sign they're on a high dose. So, you got to be careful listening to these influencers. Just because they're getting results doesn't mean they know what they're doing. They could have phenomenal genetics. Listen, Phil Heath could have gotten bigger biceps than me drinking beer sitting on the couch. That doesn't mean that he knows how to train biceps. Now, granted, Mr. Olympia probably really knows what he's doing, but genetics are a major player that people don't consider. They think that everybody's the same, and they think that if they do what that person does, they're going to get the same result. So a lot of these influencers that have great genetics that get away with these things have a lot of other people thinking that they can do it. And then these kids try to do it, it doesn't work, and they think there's something wrong with them, and they start getting depressed, and they get discouraged, they want to stop, or they just start bumping their doses, which is even worse. So it's important to understand that you probably shouldn't be listening to any of these young kids about what they do. You should, unless they have a good coach, and in that case, listen to their coach.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to what you said about coming off and people being afraid of losing tissue, because it reminded me of something here, and it goes back to the whole aggressive cutting thing. And coming from, let's say you're eating 4,000 calories and you're saying natties are at a lesser susceptibility to losing that tissue because they're not that far away from homeostasis. But the thing is, I would say another reason why you need to gradually decrease the food is not just because of all the other factors, but don't you have to wait a certain amount of time to, if you just built all this tissue, you would need to hold it for a certain amount of time so that becomes your new homeostasis?
My first cycle was 250 milligrams of test every 5 days. That's all I could afford. And I gained about 30 pounds. Now, a lot of it was water because I was eating like crap. So again, in retrospect, I thought I gained 30 pounds of muscle. So, but what really happened was I gained a little bit of body fat, I gained some muscle, and I probably gained a whole bunch of water. So I remember coming off cycle, PCT, and I lost all of it. Because in my mind, I was no longer strong, and I'm not going to put all this effort forth because I can't grow. And I just had the totally wrong mindset, worst mindset possible. People watching this, I just want to make a point that you guys might think I'm smart, but there was a time when I was a dumb kid. Everybody, no matter how smart somebody is that you follow on the internet, there was one point where they were a dumb kid. So remember that. One of you guys on here might be levels above me one day. So it's very, very possible. But as far as holding the muscle mass, the reason why I lost it is because it was brand new. That was one major reason why I lost it. It was brand new. So this is why I like to run longer cycles with clients now. So like there'll be times with a client where like from 10 weeks into the cycle to 16 weeks, they didn't really gain much muscle, but I'm working on solidifying that muscle. I want you to keep that muscle. I want your body to accept that weight. And actually, the funny thing is, the first person that told me this was somebody that was younger than me. It was Nick Trigili. Because I remember the first time I got to 260, I had lower back pumps. I couldn't move. I felt like crap. Like you couldn't believe how bad I felt. So I text Nick and I'm like, dude, how did you handle 300? He said, the first time was terrible. He said, but every single time I got there, it got easier. And I remember I reached 265, I think 3 or 4 times, 3 that I can remember definitely. And every time it was much, much easier. I was much more mobile. I could breathe better. I could function better. The first time I hit 265, I shit you not, I had to put my feet in there and kick my feet to get out of bed. Like I would roll over like a whale. And I'm pretty athletic. Like I just couldn't move. So, it's important that you hold the muscle mass for a long period of time, because then your body accepts it more and it becomes more of you. And then we even see in, I guess anecdotal situations, I don't know if there's any research on it, but I know a lot of scenarios where a muscular person will be on cycle and they'll pass that on to their kid. The family won't typically be muscular, but they were very muscular for a long period of time, the husband and the wife, and they had a child, and that child ends up being muscular. So it probably has some type of effect on the DNA as well.
Of course, I would 100% think so.
I'm saying probably because I don't want to speak in absolutes when we don't have definitive evidence.
One thing I did talk about, because I asked Alex this in the last podcast, is something I don't know if you noticed this too, is that a lot of the bodybuilders who blast and have kids end up having daughters.
See that there's different theories to that.
Nobody knows, but it's interesting.
There's so many different theories. There's so many different, anecdotal situations, but the truth is nobody really knows that answer for sure. And I don't think that's completely true, because I know plenty of people who have guys. I think that it's just something that people latched onto. And it's like, listen, it's like when you go to buy a red car, now you're all of a sudden seeing red cars outside. So if somebody starts saying that all bodybuilders are having girls, and every time a bodybuilder has a girl, you say, oh, look, it's true. There's my evidence. You're biased. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they're not paying attention to the 10 guys over here that just had boys, Now I know a ton of people. I know a ton of bodybuilders who had just boys, or their first one was a boy. I think that's more of a bias case of people looking for it.
I don't know. It definitely can be. It would make sense, but I think the notion is that the guys who get girls pregnant when they're actually blasting gear, that's when it tends to somehow end up being more of a girl. But I don't know. I have no idea.
I've never looked into it. I'm sure I could find some patterns if I did, but I wouldn't have anything to rule that out. So there's probably going to be no real good answer to that. But it is what it is. I don't have an answer for it.
So how long do you think somebody needs to really hold tissue for it to become like solidified? Because you see it, people do. They go into off season, they gain a bunch of tissue, and then they go into a prep, and then all of a sudden they lose their legs very quickly, right?
I have screwed that up with clients. I have screwed that up with myself. So, I think I even made a mistake as recently as maybe 4 years ago, where I forgot that client's legs were completely new, because they were huge, but they were brand new. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we started dieting, they fell off, and I went, shit, like I fucked that up. So now, because I burned my hand on the pot, I don't make that mistake anymore. A lot of people, again, people watching this, you think that, you're never going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. That's how you learn. Sometimes you have to burn your hand on the pot so that you remember every time. Like you'll hear me say something on a podcast, and then you still might make that mistake, and you go, shit, I knew that, and I didn't mean to do that. Like I knew better. But you've got to make the mistake for it to really burn itself in your psyche, and you'll remember it better. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. But as far as situations like that, absolutely. It's going to be situationally dependent. Now, the individual that I was talking about in that case didn't genetically have great legs, was an extremely hard worker. So we built big legs. So it was a result of his diligence and hard work, not his genetics. So once we started dieting, they fell right off. Same thing with me. I ended up at my biggest with 32-inch legs. And I think I posted a video of it numerous times, which is pretty goddamn big. And my legs did not have genetics. I've posted pictures a million times. Everybody laughing at me how I had stick legs, how skinny my legs were. That's the reality of it. So I built my legs from hard work and diligence and perseverance, and just refusing to not succeed. And my legs would fall off very, very, very easily. And even in the final weeks of prep, Scott Stevenson once actually just, set off a light bulb in my head, because I was always the tough guy who didn't back off and never got weak, and I can endure. And I was training hard up to the show, and the people that weren't training hard to the show because, they weren't as tough held their muscle better, because you're supposed to back off when you're in a weaker state. And I didn't. So I made a mistake because I thought I was badass, and it was the wrong thing to do, especially with my genetics. So I had to stop doing that too. But as far as how long to hold your muscle mass, it's individual. It's going to depend. Some people hold their muscle mass very, very well because genetically it just piles on easy, or their bodies will hold it. If I'm perfectly honest, it seems that black guys hold their muscle better than white guys. From what I've seen anecdotally and historically, they don't seem to lose the muscle mass as easy as white guys do, or even Spanish guys. Asians actually seem to hold their muscle mass really, really well. I'm not sure why.
Everybody besides white guys.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I think that Latinos and white guys are on the same genetic level. Like, we both just we don't do the best muscularly. Like, you'll have variance. Like, I did decent muscularly, but I have Sicilian, like, very strong in my background, and my grandfather just dark as hell, so I probably have black in my ancestry. So like people who have that variance, like Northern Italians are like blonde hair, blue eyes type complexion, and Southern Italians are darker. There's a reason for that. So, it depends on what's in your history too. It's not just what you look like, it's what's in your genetics. But yes, historically, that's what it is. So if you're gonna really try to set rules and try to quantify this and really get a measuring stick for it, I would say I would try to hold something at least 3 months, before you really think you own it.
Okay. That makes sense. That brings up what you just said. It brought something to my head because I've heard it before. I don't remember where I heard it, but what do you think about the notion that depending on your ethnicity is ultimately going to have play a factor in your ability to digest better foods, some foods better than others? Like, I've heard Irish guys will have a better time with steak and potatoes, and then Asian people will have better time with fish. Is that true or no?
Yeah, no, we know that. We see that pretty conclusively. That based on your heritage, you're going to digest foods that, everything is evolution and adaptation, right? So we are constantly adapting to what's in front of us, to our circumstances. So yes, if your ancestors all ate a specific food, they probably adapted really well to it. And if they were introduced to a food that they never had, 1,000 years later, probably not going to do very well with it. And even if you think about something like dieting and contest prep, what happens when you eat a junk food meal and you haven't eaten junk food in 8 weeks? You blow it up, have bad digestion, feel like crap. Body forgot what to do with it. Body's not ready for it. And this is why you shouldn't introduce new foods in the last week of prep. Some people like to load with peanut butter, but peanut butter wasn't in the prep diet. And there's been times when I wanted to introduce peanut butter, but you know what I did? I used it all week in small amounts, so their body became familiar with it. I will never add something in the final 2 days that their body has not experienced before, because their body's not going to react very well to it. But yes, now we see that conclusively across the board, that your heritage and your lineage is going to have a very, very big part in which foods you respond to, which again is why people shouldn't just say, oh, I digest beef better. Like beef builds muscle the best, chicken builds muscle the best. There's no such thing. It depends on your lineage and what you react to.
Yeah. So I know that, like potatoes, we usually bloat most people, but have you found people that have literally a better time with potatoes than even rice, even though it requires much more volume?
I literally got into an argument with a client 2 days ago who just loves potatoes. And I said to him, I said, listen, typically, I don't ever want to speak in absolutes, but I say typically anybody who does 16 ounces or over potatoes a day start to have bloating and digestive issues. He's like, I do 32 ounces, no problem, things like that. And I'm like, well, okay, if that's the case and you're sure, and that's what your feedback is, fine. But, so there's always going to be an exception to the rule. Me, if I go over 12 ounces of potatoes, I'm going to have digestive issues. And I've seen that with a lot of my clients. You will almost never see potatoes in more than one meal of my program. Yeah. And I don't use it all the time. A lot of times people use potatoes because of the potassium content. I'll just replace it with new salt or low salt or something like that, a salt substitute that's potassium. Or I'll use different forms of meats and fats and nuts and things like that if I need to get your potassium up. Whether I'm trying to regulate blood pressure, regulate composition and things like that, or I'm trying to regulate water retention. That's a different lesson, sodium, potassium pump and whatnot. But there's going to be certain circumstances where people digest foods very well and certain people don't. I don't do well with chicken. I don't do well with turkey. I digest beef like you wouldn't believe. Another person, Luke Carroll, all he eats is steak. That's all he eats. Steak and eggs. Same thing as me. And it's the only thing that doesn't mess my stomach up. If I start eating chicken, I start having issues. If I start eating turkey, I start having issues. Like not big issues, but I'll notice a difference. I digest beef and it doesn't sit in my stomach like a rock. I don't feel like I'm sluggish. It doesn't affect me like other food.
Yeah. I would also say that also you need to take into consideration the quality of that food, like grass-fed beef versus just regular, or the type of chicken you get, because one could be extremely more inflammatory than another. And then obviously just your genetic response to that difference of the grass-fed versus normal, like it could be a 9-day difference.
Well, that sucks in the United States that we actually have that option, because we have grass-fed red meat, we have non-grass-fed red meat, and there's not like a middle ground there. One's good, one's bad. Like non-grass-fed red meat is typically very high in omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory, which is obviously not good since inflammation is the hallmark of all disease. But grass-fed red meat is higher in omega-3s, which is anti-inflammatory. And I didn't realize this until a few years ago. I think I was telling an Australian client they had to get grass-fed red meat. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, It has to be grass-fed. And they're like, that's all we have. I'm like, you know that. And then I come to find that's a lot of Europe and it's a lot of the world. It's just us that doesn't have that.
Yeah, we have all these shit sources of food.
Everybody listening at home, when you've heard, cancer, red meat causes cancer, that's that red meat. It's not grass-fed red meat. It's because of the inflammatory effects of the omega-6s from the crap red meat that most of our supermarkets sell. So yeah, that'll probably exacerbate the situation because inflammation is the hallmark of disease. So, it's a precursor to disease almost always. So we want to keep our inflammation down. You do not want to be eating store-bought red meat. You want grass-fed. And it's literally, you're going to pay for it, pay the price now, or you're going to pay it later.
Yeah. Same thing with the eggs too, I think, no?
Yeah, no, well, the eggs don't have as drastic a spectrum, but yeah, you typically don't want yellow yolks. You want orange yolks because of higher omega-3 content. And it's just a little bit healthier version. But I don't think that regular eggs are as bad as the red meat that we get.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Somebody has a question here. I want to see what your response is. What do you have? Do you have any tips regarding eating 5 meals or more a day for somebody that constantly has a changing work schedule? They work nights one day, morning next day. Everything is always changing. They have no consistency in their day-to-day life schedule. How can they plan around that and make sure they get their meals in?
Well, one of the things that I do, and I know you know this, is I have an adaptive template that allows you to basically keep your pre, intra, and post meals around your workout, and then the rest of them can fluctuate around the day. Now, depending on their metabolic rate, if I want, to place carbohydrates in certain places, I'll make recommendations, but I'll usually pretty freely let them move those meals around. I call them X meals, and they can put them where they want, but pre, intra, post always stays the same. And there's a reason for that, because we need to optimize performance, and we need to optimize training, and we need to optimize recovery. So that needs to stay around the window. So my advice there is make sure your pre, intra, post always stays the same, and then have a few standard other meals, and you can move those around. And then on off days, again, everybody knows my stance on this: 0 carbs, high protein, medium fats, and that's pretty much it. You need fats for muscle building. In recovery, you need protein. You don't need carbs.
People always get confused when I say that. Again, they're, I'm going to be in deficit now. So no carbs. I got to replace the rest of it with fats.
Well, you're not in a deficit because we have a caloric medium. It's called body fat. You're always in a surplus.
Yeah. So, obviously, I don't think people also know, it's not, sometimes it's completely 0 carbs, but a lot of times we're still loading on that final meal too, to get a better response.
And what happens a lot of the time is people, they have a 0 carb day, right? So 0 carb means lower insulin. Lower insulin means lower aldosterone. Lower aldosterone means less water retention. So the scale weight that went down, you probably lost water. You didn't lose anything else.
And of course, what are you going to lose in one day?
but that's what people think. Yeah, they think they lost weight. No, you just fluctuated in water retention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I know you also, the guys who do have higher metabolic rates, there's still justification for adding it. It's case by case. I think most people don't eat carbs, but there are the guys that do just need more food. No.
Well, there's also going to be people with manual labor jobs. Yeah, I have a guy. I have a guy that jackhammers all day, and he gets a lot of carbs on his off day, because otherwise we're going to lose some muscle mass, because that's energy requirement needed. And if I don't give him that energy, then his body's going to dig into something else. It's going to burn through the protein that we're eating. It's going to burn through the fats. And that's not going to go to recovery and building. So if I don't give him an energy source and he's expending that type of energy all day, then he's not going to grow. So depending on their diet, if they have a heavy manual labor diet, a job where they're walking all day on their feet all day, then yeah, a lot of the time I will have carbohydrates on their off day, but it's because of the energy requirement. If you don't have a strenuous job, a manual labor, physical job, then you probably don't need that. Now, there is unique circumstances because people don't realize how much glucose we can burn through with creative thinking and active thinking. So if you work a really engaging creativity, high stress job where your brain's going 1,000 miles an hour, you're burning a lot of carbs. Probably could use some. So in those circumstances, I would too, but I would also consider that against, their metabolic rate, how much muscle mass they have, their age, their cycle, and whatnot.
Yeah, makes sense. Would you consider your job a high creative thinking job where you're sitting and writing programs all day?
Well, I'm answering questions all day is what I'm doing a lot. I'm reviewing. I review a lot of lifting videos from my clients because that
requires a lot of thought.
It does, because I need to make sure that I'm actually viewing it, watching. The thing is, it gets easier for me because I know what mistakes I'm looking for. When I open up a video and I see dumbbell row, I know exactly what I'm looking. I know every mistake I'm looking for already. When I see a squat, all the viewers probably know. When we see a squat, we're looking for those hips to shoot. That's the first thing we're going to look for.
I literally have a video in my drafts of that right now because I just corrected 3 people on it today this morning.
We're looking for the knees to cave. We're looking for a forward lean. We're looking for the heels to come up. We're looking for all kinds of different, but we know what we're looking for. So it becomes a little easier in that sense that I don't think that I'm doing a lot of strenuous thinking all day, because at this point, my job in the thinking has become repetitive and a little easier for me, because the more material, the easier it gets for you. So it's not like strenuous thinking. And even when I write programs, I pretty much know what to do. I tell people all the time, if I'm constantly sending you an edit, that means I'm trying to fix something. That means something's not going the way I want it to go. Your best case scenario is when I'm not changing your program. That means I'm happy with what's going on. So what happens is, usually when I send out a first program, even if I'm writing a whole new program, I very rarely have to change it again. Now, sometimes I do, yes, because it wasn't what I expected. Or maybe they're just non-compliant and I don't know. But typically I'm not editing after that first one. It's pretty easy for me. I can read all situations now and know very well what to do as long as I get the right feedback. But what will happen most of the time is you'll almost never send me the questionnaire, and I won't ask a question before writing your program. I usually have additional questions that I need to know in order to do this properly.
Okay, so let's put you in a more mentally challenging situation for you. Let's say you're creating content, because we know you don't know how to fucking put that together. Let's say you got to edit some videos. Would you say you need some carbs from that?
Oh, that would probably stress me out. That would probably require some carbs. But because of my metabolism, I have to stabilize those carbs. So that would require fats, so that my blood sugar doesn't do this. Because if I start crashing, my energy is going to crash. My mental state, my focus is going to crash. So I would need to be eating fats on top of those carbs to stabilize my blood sugar so I don't crash. So yes, in that sense, I would, because I'm pretty bad at content.
What would you say is the hardest mental block that you've seen with prep client, both bodybuilding clients and lifestyle clients, if there's any difference between the two?
Are you saying in each individual situation or a comparable situation?
In general, what do you think the biggest mental block that clients that you've dealt with face, whether the lifestyle or bodybuilding, if there's a difference between like the different mental struggles you see in those people, what they display?
Consistency.
Just inconsistency.
People don't realize, how much consistency matters. And if 9 out of 10 times, if you ask everybody if they're consistent, they're going to tell you yes, until you sit down and examine their program and show them that they're not. Everybody remembers the post that I made that went viral. I said, this is what happens if you miss one meal a week, 500 calories. You end up missing 26,000 calories for the year. That's just one meal a week, not one meal a day, not one meal every couple of days, one meal per week. You just missed 26,000 calories for the year. So that just shows how much everything builds. And then I made another post recently that's basically explained that people will make progress, and then they'll take a couple steps back and they'll start making progress again. And they think that they're making more progress. No, you still got to get back to the point where you left off before you're making progress. So now you just work to here, you drop to here. So now you have to redo this work before you can make some progress. So people don't realize that they're bouncing up and down like that and just, spinning their wheels rather than compounding results, because you have to be linear, consistent to make those type of gains. Now at the beginning, when you're fresher, you're younger, more beginner response, no. But when you get to the point where you're really trying to put on extreme amounts of muscle mass the body doesn't want to, you have to. If you're dieting and you're not, and you want to get shredded, you can't screw up. You can't miss meals. You can't overeat meals. You can't miss cardio, or you're not going to be there. It's just not going to happen.
Do you think having mental fortitude is something that can be taught to somebody, or do you think it's something that people just have or they don't? Have you had clients that had struggles before?
I know it can, because I've done it. I did it with my brother. My brother was he was a very meek, shy, I don't want to say soft, but he was a softer kid when he was younger. And he used to come to my wrestling matches. And then he asked me, he's like, can you train me? I want to be a good wrestler. I said, sure. I said, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. It's not playtime. He said, yes, I want to. I said, sure. It's going to suck. It's not going to be fun. And he said, yes. Okay. So we were in the back room of my house. And the first thing I started doing was beating the hell out of him. And he would cry and cry. And my mom would hear him. And then she would come to the back room and she would yell at me. And then I would say, he's looking at that door waiting for you to come because he knows you're going to come save him. And that's why this is not working. I said, it's going to be your fault that he's going to lose and he's going to have a bad life because you're protecting him. So what she did is she stopped coming. He would look at the door, and he'd look at the door. And then finally he realized mom's not coming. And then he started fighting back. And this tooth right here is fake because he headbutt me in the face. So, and even he became a really tough kid. There was a situation where an opposing team, a rival team, the crowd was being so obnoxious, it was riling our whole team. I was like, you got to stop this. He went out there and beat the life out of the kid, like as close to assault as you could possibly get. He became a vicious competitor. He became a very, very tough person from a very soft person with rewiring. You can train yourself to be tough if you're not. You can wire yourself to be consistent if you're not. We can do anything. Our bodies adapt. The sky's the limit, and people don't believe it, but it is. So even if you're not tough right now and you don't lift right now hard, it's not your fault. You've just never been shown. Now, if somebody shows you and you decide not to keep up with it, that's your fault. So when I always tell people, when I take a new client to the gym, the first thing I don't go through lessons. What I'll do is I'll say, how many reps do you think you can get on this? I know you know this. And then they'll tell me how many reps they think it gets. Okay, let's get under the bar. Let's go. And I'll make them get more. I'll intimidate them. I'll be obnoxious. I'll scream so loud the whole gym is watching. Everybody's watching you. I said 12. If you drop it at 10, everybody's going to see it. I'll humiliate them. I'll embarrass them. I'll put so much pressure on them, and they'll get it. And then when they get up, I'll say, you told me 10. Right?
Do you remember we were at the gym in New York, whatever it was, that one with 5 floors.
Extreme?
And it was on the Extreme. We were on it was like the third working set, and I got 8 reps. I failed at 8 reps. And then we put the weight up 80 pounds. And then I got 20 reps.
And then what was the question I asked you? I said, what does that tell you about what you've been doing?
I don't remember.
That you had more, you just didn't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't have to prove it to me. You had to prove it to you.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you need to be forced to prove it to yourself. You need to be backed into a corner. You need to be put under pressure.
A lot of this is adrenaline.
But the whole fact is, you were able to generate that adrenaline. You were able to do it. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why, and this is research supported. They call it a game face, right? So if you see me getting ready for a set, I'm gritting my teeth, I'm making faces, I'm angry, I'm generating that adrenaline for the set. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking bad thoughts, I'm getting mad, I'm doing anything I can to get that adrenaline pumping. Yeah. And there's a reason that works. It works. So it matters. And if you can learn to do that, see, people think that they fail. I got 10 reps. I couldn't possibly have got more than 10 reps. If I put a gun to your daughter's head, you'd have got 20.
Everybody's heard that, but I don't think anybody. It's obviously people understand, but a lot of people still don't. They still see the videos of guys screaming in the gym,
but they haven't been put in that stressful situation where they were forced to. See, somebody comes to the gym with me. Luckily in my situation now, I have a certain reputation, certain expectations. So they're intimidated by me. They want to appease me. They want to do well. They don't want to let me down. So I'm able to pressure them. And if I can't pressure them, I'll embarrass them. I'll make the whole gym look. Mm-hmm. So I'll put the pressure on one way or the other to make them do it. But then that proves to them that they could do better than they thought they could. So almost never, you're never going to do this on your own. You're going to need somebody to put you through it and show you. That's why I tell all my clients, listen, please find the big guy in the gym. They're almost never going to be mean to you. Say, listen, I just want to learn how to train hard. I don't want to be your training partner. Let me train with you once and show me how to really train. And that person's probably going to beat you into the ground, but you're going to learn you could do it.
Yeah. If that person tries to push them.
Well, that's why I said pick the big guy who trains hard. Find somebody. See, what I used to do is at your old gym, my buddy Russ Allen, who IFBB pro, great bodybuilder. I used to hit him up all. Huh?
Oh, you're talking about from Denver? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would text him and be like, listen, I got a client in your gym. I need your help. He's not tough. He needs to be tough. And he knew exactly that. I got it. He would beat them into the ground, and then all of a sudden that person starts growing.
Yeah.
One question.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference. I remember when I lived there, I was training with Wadi, and it's like just going and doing sessions, having that person there that's like, all right, like, I'm going to do the 130s, and he would just pick out the 150s and be like, do the 150s. And it's like, I did the 150s. That somehow just fucking happened every time. Like,
that's why a training partner always works better, because there's no accountability training by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's hard to find a good one. It really is.
It is, but you know what? It's not impossible. People who are determined find a way. Losers decide why they can't. Winners decide how can I. They'll find a way. Listen, I've had people that'll train with different people different days of the week because they want a training partner. Yeah. Or they'll train at a time when there's a lot of big guys in there so they can get a spot and they get somebody to push them through a few sets. They'll find a way to get that assistance when they need it. And that makes a difference. It's very hard to just do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. You always want to stay comfortable to some extent.
You can't be shy. You can't be shy.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been on here for an hour and a half. I don't want to make this a 2-hour podcast. Do you have anything you want to go over? Anything you want to touch on here? I know you want to touch about your class or something like that.
No, I don't really do a lot of promotion and whatnot. I just wanted to jump on here and do this. I know that we've been planning to do this for a long time. My new gym that I go to, I had a bunch of people come up to me that recognized me from your show, and they're like, when are you going to do another one? So I was like, actually, real soon. So that's actually Sawgrass Fitness in Coral Springs. A lot of people don't know that it's there. It's John De La Rosa's gym. And it's one of the best gyms that I've ever seen. It's got an amazing amount of competitors, high-level competitors, like really, really good athletes. Like everybody in there is very, very serious. And John pretty much bought every good piece of equipment you could possibly think of. And John's the type of person where if you could think of something he didn't, he's going to go buy it. So like if he thinks he's missing something, he's going to get it. But like I've even had people that are following me on Instagram that didn't know the gym was there, and they came up to me in the gym. They're like, "Thank you." Like I didn't even know this was here, because they didn't do a lot of, I guess, advertisement and marketing. But yeah, it's in I'm in Coral Springs. I believe it's in Plantation, across from the Sawgrass Mall in around Coral Springs area, Florida. Amazing gym, and there's a lot of competitors in there. So a lot of the kids ask me there. So I'm gonna make sure I do more of these for you guys.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, they're always fucking asking for you more than anybody else. They want to get the answers from you.
I like educating as long as people listen.
Yeah. That's the problem, is a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, but you know what? If I get 10 people that make a difference out of this, that's worth it.
Of course. Well, all right. I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for tuning in, guys.
We'll do it again soon.
Yeah. Make sure you're following Phil. If you're not, you probably already are. That's probably why you're already watching this, but make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding.